This video will discuss problems that I had with this VW rear window convertible regulator that were not discussed in the videos that I have seen on YouTube. When we installed this new cable assembly, which was aftermarket, it was way too tight. The cable was so tight that you could play a tune on it. If you leave this cable with that much tension on it, it's going to cause early failure and possibly damage to all the guide rollers. I doubt that the original VW cable assembly would be too short, but I have a feeling that all aftermarket cable assemblies will be too short. This photo does show the proper routing of the cable. I'll attach a couple of YouTube video links to the comment section in this video. Most new cars use these cable-operated regulators, and they're not near as dependable and durable as the old scissors type regulator used years ago. I'm retired now, but if I was still in business, I would buy this cable in bulk and the cable ends and the swedging tool and make my own cables. After my son purchased this cable assembly for $80, we found one on eBay that appears to be the same thing for $20. This photo and other photos show the cable spool and damaged cable. This is the main cable spool that's driven by the window motor. This photo shows the proper cable routing and also shows at the top of the photo how the cable end slides into the bracket. The plastic piece at the bottom holds the cable ends, and once it's bolted down, the cable ends can't come loose. When the new cable is installed and routed properly around the nylon plastic guide rollers, then you place this plastic piece back on the stud and put the nut and washer back on. That's the last thing you do, other than the white nylon guide piece shown later. Please note the routing of the cable around the guide spool. The guide spool has grooves in it, and the cable must not overlap, must not touch where they cross. If you fail to do that, you'll have early failure. So we installed this cable, and then we found the bad news. And the bad news is that this cable is too short. There was extreme tension on that cable. Yes, it could be used that way, but it will fail quickly. And this is how you'll know if your cable's too short. If there's no spacing between the coils of this spring, you'll have coil spring bind. That means that that cable cannot move at all. It automatically adjusts the tension on that cable with this spring. Therefore, if that spring's compressed completely, it's going to be way too tight. More photos of cable routing and the main cable spool and the motor bolts on top where the 3 bolt holes are. I would suggest putting a bolt and washer through this guide spool. It tends to flip out when you have tension on it. In this photo, you can see the grooves on the main cable spool that guide the cable. Notice the teeth on the main cable spool that the motor drives. You can see where the motor engages that gear. This is the way it should look, that side up. We cut this cable 1/2 inch and it worked fine, but I would suggest cutting 3/4 of an inch out. You must make your cut along with the cable, not across the cable. And the best way to do that is with a Dremel tool. But there's other ways that you could probably do it too. You could use a bench grinder with great care. You might use a hacksaw with great care. If you make your cut across the cable, then you'll have the 3/4 inch piece free, and it will spin on the white nylon tube. Then you will create more trouble because you're going to have to hold that little piece and keep it from spinning while you cut that off. And this is really tough material. It can't be uncoiled. I used my drill press vise to hold this cable. You could use your vise on the bench, or possibly with vice grips with great care so that you don't collapse the housing. But you'll need to hold that and steady your hand on the bench or on the vise so you can make a precise cut with your Dremel tool. Wear safety glasses because these little cut-off wheels can come apart. They're very fragile. They break easy. Now, mine is the original Dremel tool, but you can buy a Dremel-like tool at Harbor Freight, and I've seen them go for as little as $10 on sale. However, it'll take you longer to make the cut because they don't have near the power that this real Dremel tool has. When I rested my hand on the bench with this Dremel tool, I was able to make a very precision, surgeon-like cut on that cable housing with no problem at all. You have to be really careful in doing this so as not to cut through the white cable tube and nick the cable, because if you nick the cable, then you're going to have early failure. You can use the regular Dremel tool without this optional cable. I already had my cable hooked up to this tool, so I used it as is. The next step is to cut 1/2 inch or 3/4 inch off this white nylon tube. The safest way to cut this white tube is with wire strippers. After you have cut that section away, lay your utility knife on its side and slice that section away. After you have done that, these little sections of the outer cable housing can be twisted with pliers, needle nose, and removed easily from the cable. 1/2 inch removed works fine, but I would suggest 3/4 inch. Now the cable shortened and ready to install. I'll repeat this, it's important. This cable end plastic piece is the last piece to install. You can stretch that over the stud and put your nut and washer back on, and then you'll have your cable installed. Notice we have lubricated this window regulator, rollers and cable with white lubriplate. This is what you do last. Place your cable over the guide plastic piece. It took extreme force to force that cable over this white piece when the cable was too short. Now it easily goes over this plastic piece, and that's the way it should be. Remember, it's the coil spring that gives enough to let you move this cable over this guide piece, and the coil spring maintains the proper tension throughout operation on this cable. And here's the final photo of the regulator ready to install. Another close-up of that coil spring and how you have coil spring bind because there's no spacing between the coils. Don't forget to wire tie the cable to the upper bracket shown here so as not to get caught in anything. Now I want to discuss with you some of the problems we had. First off, you can test this regulator by hooking the wiring harness up to it in the car without bolting the regulator in. Now this window regulator can have the window bolted to it, and you can install the whole assembly. You don't have to install the regulator first and then the window. When we hooked the wiring connector up to this regulator to test it, it wouldn't move but part of the way, and the other windows wouldn't work at all. So we thought, what the heck has gone wrong now? Well, we thought it over and figured that there was probably some safety factors, safety switches involved in the operation of this, and that turned out to be true. You have to have the top down and latched, or up and latched, and we had it down but not latched. Also, we had the hood open and the doors open. So when you test this, make sure that you have the hood closed, the doors closed, the top up and latched or down and latched. Then everything should work properly. Now, if you look carefully, these mounting studs for this regulator have a Allen wrench opening to adjust the regulator. Of course, if this is the same regulator and not a new one, then your adjustments will be the same as they were and you won't have to adjust it. Also, the window itself, where it bolts to the regulator, can be tilted. There's a tilt adjustment. So make sure that you have this window adjusted properly to match the weather strip of your top. I hope this video has helped you, and I also think that by shortening this cable you have prevented the early failure of your new cable.